What would you do if you discovered the person sitting next to you at every briefing was feeding secrets to the enemy? How far would you go to expose a traitor who had earned everyone's trust? Can you imagine the weight of knowing that someone you've shared meals with might be responsible for the deaths of your fellow soldiers? Colonel Mary Thompson faced exactly this nightmare scenario on a rain-soaked morning in March 2019, when a seemingly routine intelligence review would uncover the most dangerous kind of enemy, the one hiding in plain sight. From which part of the world are you watching this story unfold today? If you find tales of military intelligence and hidden betrayals compelling, consider following for more stories of courage under impossible circumstances. The secure briefing room at Forward Operating Base Sentinel buzzed with the usual pre-meeting chatter. Officers shuffled through classified documents, tablets glowed with encrypted data, and the coffee machine worked overtime, fueling another day of strategic planning. Colonel Mary Thompson entered precisely at 0800 hours, her reputation for punctuality as legendary as her analytical mind. At 42, Thompson commanded respect not through intimidation, but through an almost supernatural ability to see patterns others missed. Her colleagues often joked that she could spot a discrepancy in a 1,000-page report faster than most people could find their car keys. What they didn't know was that this gift would soon reveal a truth that would shake the entire command structure. Major David Kellerman looked up from his laptop as she approached. Clean-cut, dependable, with 3 tours under his belt and a silver star on his chest, he embodied everything the Army valued in an officer. His smile was warm, genuine, the kind that made junior officers feel at ease and senior commanders trust his judgment implicitly. "Morning, Colonel," he said, closing his laptop with a soft click. Ready for another thrilling day of intelligence analysis. Thompson returned his smile, but something nagged at her. Perhaps it was the way he closed the laptop so quickly, or the slight tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there the day before. In her experience, details mattered, and David Kellerman was suddenly full of them. The briefing began with routine updates. Enemy movements in Sector 7, supply line disruptions, weather forecasts that would affect planned operations. Thompson found herself watching Kellerman more closely than usual. He took notes, asked pertinent questions, contributed insights that demonstrated his deep understanding of regional tactics. Everything appeared normal until Lieutenant Sarachon presented the latest intelligence intercepts. As she detailed enemy communications patterns, Thompson noticed Kellerman's pen pause mid-sentence. It lasted only a fraction of a second, but in that moment, she saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. Recognition. After the meeting, Thompson retreated to her office, mind racing. She pulled up Kellerman's personnel file, scrutinizing details she'd never questioned before. Born in Ohio, graduated West Point with honors, exemplary service record, commendations from multiple commanding officers. On paper, he was perfect, perhaps too perfect. She began cross-referencing operational timelines with Kellerman's duty assignments. The pattern that emerged made her stomach clench. Every major operation he'd been briefed on had encountered unexpected resistance. Supply convoys hit at precisely the right moment. Patrol routes compromised. Safe houses discovered. The correlation could be coincidental, but Thompson's instincts screamed otherwise. She needed more evidence, concrete proof that wouldn't rely on suspicion alone. Making accusations against a decorated officer required certainty, especially when that officer was trusted by everyone from privates to generals. That evening, she implemented what she privately called Operation Honeypot. She began feeding Kellerman false information, carefully crafted intelligence designed to test her growing suspicions. Each piece was unique, traceable, and completely fabricated. The first test came 3 days later. Thompson had mentioned in Kellerman's presence that a high-value target would be moving through grid reference 314 to 528 at dawn. She made sure the information seemed credible, backed by fictional surveillance reports and corroborating testimony from imaginary assets. Dawn brought confirmation of her worst fears. Intelligence intercepts revealed enemy forces had moved to precisely that grid reference, setting up an ambush for forces that would never arrive. The trap was perfectly positioned, showing intimate knowledge of standard army tactics and patrol patterns. Thompson felt sick. A man she'd trusted, shared meals with, recommended for promotion, was systematically betraying everything they stood for. But personal feelings had to wait. She needed irrefutable evidence, the kind that would hold up under the scrutiny of a court-martial. The second test was more elaborate. She created a fictional prisoner transfer, complete with forged documents and staged conversations about moving a captured enemy commander to a secure facility. The route she described to Kellerman was deliberately vulnerable, with multiple choke points perfect for an ambush. Within 24 hours, enemy forces had repositioned along that exact route. The precision was undeniable. Kellerman wasn't just passing along information. He was providing detailed tactical analysis that made enemy operations devastatingly effective. Thompson realized the full scope of the betrayal. Kellerman had access to operational planning, troop movements, supply schedules, and communication protocols. He was a cancer in the heart of their command structure, and every day he remained undetected meant more soldiers would die. But catching him in the act required careful planning. She needed to document his methods, identify his contacts, and ensure that his entire network could be rolled up simultaneously. A premature move would allow him to warn his handlers, potentially compromising other operations or endangering embedded assets. She began conducting her own surveillance, using skills learned in intelligence training that she'd never expected to apply to a fellow officer. She monitored his computer usage, tracked his movements, and observed his behavior patterns. What she discovered was a masterclass in operational security. Kellerman never used his official communications for treasonous activities. Instead, he employed a sophisticated system of dead drops, coded messages, and encrypted communications that operated completely parallel to military channels. His tradecraft was professional, suggesting formal training by a foreign intelligence service. The breakthrough came during a routine maintenance check of the base's communication systems. Thompson had quietly arranged for technical specialists to conduct deeper analysis of network traffic, ostensibly as a security upgrade. Hidden in terabytes of legitimate data, they found anomalous transmissions from Kellerman's quarters. The messages were encrypted, but patterns in their timing and frequency told a story. They correlated perfectly with briefings Kellerman attended, operational plans he reviewed, and intelligence summaries he helped prepare. He was transmitting classified information on a regular schedule, as reliable as a Swiss watch. Thompson faced a critical decision. She could arrest Kellerman immediately, ending his ability to pass information, but potentially losing the chance to identify his entire network. Or she could continue the investigation, gathering more evidence while soldiers remained at risk. She chose a middle path. Working with a small team of trusted specialists, she implemented comprehensive surveillance while feeding Kellerman carefully controlled information. Every piece of intelligence he received was monitored, every transmission recorded, every contact traced. The network that emerged was more extensive than Thompson had imagined. Kellerman wasn't working alone. He was part of a sophisticated intelligence operation that had embedded assets at multiple levels throughout the military hierarchy. The scope was breathtaking and terrifying. 3 weeks into the expanded investigation, Thompson got the break she needed. Kellerman made contact with his handler during what appeared to be a routine supply run to a nearby village. Hidden cameras captured the exchange, recording not just the meeting, but also the sophisticated communication equipment Kellerman used to transmit stolen secrets. The handler was identified as a colonel in a foreign intelligence service, operating under diplomatic cover. The implications were staggering. This wasn't opportunistic espionage. It was a systematic penetration of American military operations by a hostile foreign power. Thompson coordinated with FBI counterintelligence and Army Criminal Investigation Command to plan simultaneous arrests. The operation had to be executed with surgical precision. Any delay or miscommunication would allow the network to escape or destroy evidence. On a Tuesday morning that seemed identical to dozens of others, Thompson walked into the briefing room knowing it would be Kellerman's last. She watched him take his usual seat, open his laptop, and prepare for another day of betraying the oath he'd sworn to uphold. The briefing proceeded normally for exactly 17 minutes. Then military police entered through 3 different doors, weapons drawn, faces grim with purpose. Kellerman's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to resignation in the space of a heartbeat. Major David Kellerman, Thompson said, her voice steady despite the emotional turmoil she felt. You are under arrest for treason, espionage, and violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The room erupted in shocked voices, but Thompson kept her eyes fixed on Kellerman. In that moment, she saw not the colleague she'd trusted, but the professional operative he'd always been. His mask had finally slipped, revealing the calculating intelligence that had made him so effective at his true mission. Kellerman said nothing as they cuffed him, but his eyes met Thompson's one final time. In that gaze, she saw acknowledgement of her superior tradecraft, professional respect from one intelligence officer to another, despite their opposing loyalties. The arrest continued throughout the day. Kellerman's network included 2 other officers, 3 enlisted personnel, and a civilian contractor. The scope of the operation was unprecedented in recent military history, a reminder that the enemy's most dangerous weapons weren't always bombs or bullets. The investigation revealed that Kellerman had been recruited during his second tour, after suffering injuries that required extended medical treatment overseas. His handlers had exploited his vulnerability, combining financial incentives with ideological manipulation to turn a decorated officer into a weapon against his own country. The intelligence he provided had contributed to numerous enemy successes over a 3-year period. ambushes that had killed American soldiers, supply lines that had been disrupted, operations that had failed due to mysteriously perfect enemy preparation. The human cost of his betrayal was measured in lives lost and missions compromised. During his court-martial, Kellerman showed no remorse. He claimed his actions were justified by political beliefs, that he was serving a higher cause than mere nationalism. Thompson testified about the investigation, laying out the methodical process that had exposed his treachery. The evidence was overwhelming. Encrypted communications, photographic surveillance, financial records showing payments from foreign sources, and testimony from the network members who agreed to cooperate. Kellerman was convicted on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Thompson received a Legion of Merit for her role in uncovering the spy ring, but the recognition felt hollow. The betrayal had shattered her faith in the absolute trustworthiness of her colleagues. She began viewing every interaction through the lens of potential deception, analyzing words and gestures for signs of duplicity. The base implemented new security protocols as a direct result of Thompson's investigation. Background checks were intensified, communication systems were upgraded, and counterintelligence training became mandatory for all personnel with access to classified information. 6 months after Kellerman's arrest, Thompson was promoted to brigadier general and transferred to a position overseeing military counterintelligence operations. Her experience hunting the enemy within made her uniquely qualified to protect against future penetrations. The case became a classified study in military intelligence schools, teaching future officers about the dangers of insider threats and the techniques used to identify them. Thompson's methodical approach became the template for investigating suspected espionage within military ranks. Years later, when young intelligence officers asked Thompson about her most challenging case, she would describe the weight of suspecting a trusted colleague, the moral complexity of continuing an investigation while soldiers remained at risk, and the satisfaction of protecting her country from the enemy within. But she never mentioned the personal cost, how the investigation had changed her, making her more suspicious, more isolated, more aware of the darkness that could hide behind a friendly smile and a decorated uniform. Trust, once broken by betrayal, never quite healed the same way. The lesson Thompson learned wasn't just about catching spies. It was about the price of vigilance, the burden of suspicion, and the recognition that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who knows exactly how to appear as a friend. In the end, Major David Kellerman had been exactly what he appeared to be, a highly trained, dedicated professional serving his country's interests. The tragedy was that his country wasn't the United States of America, and his professionalism had been turned against the soldiers who trusted him with their lives. Thompson's investigation had saved countless lives by exposing the network, but it had also revealed an uncomfortable truth about modern warfare. The battlefield wasn't just in distant countries. It existed in briefing rooms, mess halls, and anywhere classified information could be accessed by those willing to betray their oath for money, ideology, or coercion. The ghost of David Kellerman haunted every subsequent security briefing, a reminder that eternal vigilance wasn't just a patriotic slogan, but a practical necessity in a world where enemies could look exactly like friends.